All right, I think we'll get started right now. So this presentation is covering incorporating event frames into your everyday operations. I'm Ellery Murdock. I've worked for OSIsoft for about 6 years, a little over 6 years. In my previous role, I was the Event Frames Initiative Lead, and I recently transitioned into a technical product manager for batch interfaces, RT reports, and event frames. Today we'll give a quick introduction to event frames. We'll then go over building event frame context and what that might mean to you. We'll cover some best practices surrounding creation, utilization, and visualization of event frames, and then we'll end with a quick summary. First, we want to make sure everyone's on the same page with exactly what event frames are. The short and simple way to explain them is event frames are bookmarks for time series data. They help capture critical event contexts and then provide meaning to users, coworkers, clients, customers, etc. by making it easier to find, analyze, and report on a specific event. There are three main parts to an event frame, right? A start time, an end time, and then context. And context here is the key part. When we first talk about context, we talk about the asset related to the event frame. This is the piece of equipment that's inherently related to the event frame. After we discuss the asset, the next important thing are the event frame attributes, and these are a number of different things. Text entries, placeholders for manual data entry, and more commonly what we see is customers utilizing calculated data with the event frame context. Here we're looking at a simple event frame in PySystem Explorer. My hope is that many of you have seen this before, but chances are we might have some new faces. So this is a normal event frame, a standard event frame in PySystem Explorer. This has all the important information right at a glance, right? The event frame name, the start time, the end time, and then for a lot of customers, the event frame template is something they really like to see and they key off of. We can see that this is a parent event frame, and it's part of an event frame hierarchy because of the plus sign designated in the red box. When we expand it, we can see that we have a parent event frame and children event frames. You can have as many levels as you need to correctly monitor your process or your operation. Once you double click on an event frame in this list, you're brought to a general page, right? And this is where you can see all the inherent information for their event frame, right? The start time, the end time, the name, the event frame description, etc. Most customers go straight to the attributes tab, which is what we're looking at here. And again, this is where you're going to get the majority of your context from for your event frame. There are three main ways to create event frames that we talk about here at PyWorld. Batch framework interfaces, asset analytics or analyses, and then AFSDK. If you're using custom code, AFSDK is pretty common to create event frames as well. What we're going to be mainly focusing on is asset analytics, using analyses to create event frames. We'll go over that quite a few times in this presentation. Asset analytics is a way to perform calculations on a specified schedule. They use AF attribute values as inputs, and there can be a number of different outputs, right? There can be calculation results, roll-ups, event frames, or SQC, SPC type information. We need to understand a little bit more about event frame generation with asset analytics. And so there are some configuration steps that you need to be aware of because we'll cover them a little bit later in the presentation. So everything is based off of an event frame template. With that, we also have some scheduling that we can assign to the analysis. This is either periodic or event triggered, right? Whenever you get a new value to your AF attribute, it then triggers the condition to look and see if your start trigger has been met. Then we get into the event frame definition part, and this is where we have a start and an end trigger, and additionally, we can add output variable or additional variables and outputs at close. And again, we'll go over all of this as we go through the presentation today. Now that we have a general idea of what an event frame is, we want to talk about how to appropriately build event frame context. This can mean a number of different things to different users, and every customer has a different way of how they might like to leverage event frames. Before we get into this, though, we really need to start with a basic question. Why, right? Why do we care about event frames? What is a critical context, and why do we care about them? So this begs the question, why do critical events matter? When we look a little bit further and we put it in the context of the PySystem, it becomes, why should users invest in event frames? And over the course of the last few days, I've been asking myself this a lot and going through a number of different reasons why customers and users might want to leverage event frames. And it always comes back to a really powerful yet simple concept, and that is critical events define success or lack thereof. Every single thing you do in your business can be summarized by a few key critical events or maybe many key critical events, and these define whether you succeed or fail at your overall everyday operating schedule, right? When we, again, put this in context of the PI system, event frames have a direct impact on solving a business problem. To explain that a little bit more, we really need to look at the 4 main steps to building event frame context. If you follow these 4 steps, you should be able to get plenty of context out of your event frames and really leverage them to help solve a business problem or your business case. So the 4 steps, again, simply stated, are defining a business case, creating measurable objectives, then you go through the steps of event frame implementation and event frame evaluation. And again, we'll go into each step really quickly here. So everyone in this room has defined a business case at some point or time in their career. And again, it means different things to different people, but the basics of a business case are specified here on the slide, right? A business case is a goal or an objective. Usually, that ends up being a problem or an opportunity. If you solve this problem or work towards this opportunity, you will make a positive commercial or internal impact within your business. One of the important things when kind of looking at business cases is whether or not they have a realistic time horizon. A lot of us have really lofty, big, overarching goals, and if we can't assign a realistic time horizon to them, a realistic timetable or deadline, it becomes really hard to work towards it and to measure our success as we're working towards it. One of the things I've noticed when I was looking at different business cases is you have a lot higher success rate if you take a larger business case, break it up into smaller, more manageable chunks that have realistic time horizons that you can actually act upon. Audience is key when looking at your business case. If you don't know who you're working towards or who you're working for, solving the problem really doesn't matter that much to that many people, right? It should be defined and qualified for impacted persons who will be affected by it. Lastly, there's a sense of involved risk. And for me, this is much more of a software and data risk, right? So will you have to touch production data? Will you have to alter production data? Will you have to alter templates that other customers and coworkers might be relying on? That really comes into play here, and you should look at that when you're evaluating your overall business case. Next, we look at creating measurable objectives. All this is application of data to your business case. This is looking and searching for tangible outcomes that you can attach and look at and basically measure your success or failure with specific event frames. We also like to bring in event frame utilization here, right? How will you use event frames to attack your business case? So if your business case is revolving around alarms, some sort of pump alarms, for example, does the count matter? Are you only looking at how many alarms you're generating? Or maybe during these alarms, you have some important process parameters that are going crazy. In that case, you don't want to look at the event frame count, you want to look at the event frame attributes on these. Maybe during this pump alarm, you're getting some sort of waste generated, and you really care about the waste. In that case, you really want to look for the event frame summary information, right? Calculate the waste over each event frame, and then use that summary information to make and refine your business case to solve your business problem. After we've defined our measurable objectives, we then need to look towards event frame implementation. So this is actually going to your event frame template. It's taking your measurable objectives, and it's linking them one-to-one to attributes. And while there always isn't a perfect one-to-one ratio of measurable objectives to attributes, this is where you go through that process of defining what sort of context you want on your event frames. This is also where you verify your event frame creation method. How am I going to create these event frames? How will they be utilized? And during this process, you can take some time and you go through event frame testing and recovery, right? You simply put your analysis, backfill your analysis, and see if your event frames match up and reach your goal that you were aiming towards in the beginning. The most important step of this whole process is this 4th step right here, the event frame evaluation. Out of all the customers that I've seen and worked with, this is the step that gets utilized the least, but coincidentally is the most important. This is where you take some time and you go back to your business case and you look through the whole process. Were your measurable objectives met? Were your events created on time and when appropriate? Does each event frame have a direct impact on your business case? If you look to answer these questions after you've gone through creating your event frames, it really helps you put them in perspective. And again, if you're not answering your business case or you're not solving your business problem, what's the point of these event frames, right? And this is really important to go back and revisit your previously defined steps. Maybe you found additional data when you're looking at your event frames that would help to go put into your business case. You can update that. Maybe you didn't capture all of your measurable objectives correctly and you need to go tweak those. Maybe your event frames were getting created too often or not often enough, so you might need to go back to the implementation step and make updates and changes there. So let's go over a quick example. Again, this is very simple, very low level, so hopefully we all can, or high level, I guess, so we can all understand it. We want to do and monitor pump downtime alarms. So this is a problem, and we talk problem or opportunity. This is obviously a problem, and whenever we run into these pump downtimes, we are seeing both commercial impacts, we can't get what we promised the customer, and internal impacts, we can't rely on what we need to create, right? If we were to work on this business case, the time horizon of this is it's effective immediately, right? If we were able to make and create some steps to start mitigating our downtime alarms, our downtime pump alarms, we would have an immediate effect on our operators. And this goes hand in hand with the audience, right? We're looking at equipment operators here. Each equipment operator is responsible for the pumps, and they need to look and monitor and manage these when they go down or offline. So if we create some sort of event frame that focuses on this business case, these operators will be directly impacted, and these are the audience we're working towards. This is low risk because we're touching new templates. We're not directly editing or changing production data. We're defining new templates and new analyses to go dive into this business case. Measurable objectives. Right off the bat, we know we have a simple measurable objective of we need an event frame to match our downtime, right? When the downtime starts, the event frame should start. When the downtime ends, the event frame should end. That's a gimme. We now need to look at the attributes that we can place on this event frame. We know that each event frame will need a reason code, right? Why did this go down? What can the operator do in order to mitigate this next? It's hard to say without looking at a reason code. We need to look at the duration. This duration affects important process parameters that are measured and captured, and when the pump is down and we can't capture these, we still need to know how they were affected during the runtime of the event frame. We then look towards the implementation and the evaluation. So we define our event frame template, and this is again where we take our measurable objectives and put them into attributes on the event frame. We know we have a pump element, so we create an analysis on that pump element to go and try and tackle this business problem, right? We have a simple attribute on that element that is just the status of that pump. We can monitor that as our start trigger for our analysis to capture when the pump is down or online or offline. We'll then verify our attributes, and we'll run this in recovery mode, and we'll take a look at what event frames we generated and if they really match when our pump was offline. Next, after a month or two, we'll go back and work with the operators, and we'll perform an event frame evaluation, right? Was our business case met? Were our measurable objectives met? Were our event frames created on time and appropriately? Most importantly, what's bundled up into all of this is, did the operators get what they need from these event frames? Were they able to mitigate and minimize the amount of downtime they had on their pumps? If you can't answer that question, and we need to go back to one of these previous steps and tweak them in order to get to a measurable, positive result. So with this, the key takeaways here are we really do need to start with the why. If you're just starting with event frames, you're a new customer, and you want to get started on these 4 steps, it really does help starting with the why. That really frames your business case, and it frames your reason for creating these event frames right from the start. Once you have that, each event frame should contribute to that overall goal, and that has direct impact on reaching that overall goal. With this, we want to talk about capturing meaningful data next. I know a lot of us have already started creating event frames, and now we might be wondering, okay, we've created event frames. How can we make sure we're capturing the most context from these event frames as possible? How do we know what we're doing right? So I've created a few different pathways where we can kind of talk about this and discuss this. Before we get there, however, I urge you to try and answer this question. What percentage of your event frames are utilized after creation? What percentage of event frames are you using in DataLink, in Archie Reports, in PyVision? Chances are it's a lot less than you think. When I go on site and I work with customers directly, I always ask this question. And the answer, I've never heard an answer above 50%, and usually they're a lot lower than that. So that really begs the question, what is the context and what is the goal of these event frames? What are you trying to achieve? You need to answer that. So with this, we really want to talk about capturing meaningful data, not necessarily all data. And at first glance, you might be wondering, well, that's the whole point of the Pi system, capture all of the data, correct? And you're exactly right, that's not changing. Again, the data archive is here to capture all data, all of your process data, everything you might need. The data archive is the heart and soul of that. Again, Asset Framework is a layer on top of this. This provides context and metadata. This frames your data archive data in a usable and meaningful way. And again, event frames are just another layer on top of that. They're data bookmarks, right? So when we talk about event frames specifically, you want to capture meaningful data, not necessarily all data. Again, that data is still there, even if you're not capturing it. It's in the data archive. It's just how you frame that and whether you promote that to be a critical event context or not. The ideal scenario that we try to foster is event frames are for capturing critical event contexts. However, the observed scenario is quite different. Customers tend to capture anything and everything. So this kind of brings a few, actually one quick, so there's the story that we've all heard, shoot first and ask questions later, right? With event frames, it's kind of create an event frame first, figure out why it matters later. And that's the script that we're trying to flip to see why it actually matters and how you can use it to your best advantage. So with this, I created a problem statement, a solution, and a result that current customers who are generating event frames can go through in order to verify and see if they're getting the most context out of their event frames. Before we get into that, though, you really do need to stop and think, what counts as a critical event context for me and my situation? What do I need? What events do I need to capture? Only after you've done that can you go to the next step of creating a business case and creating an evaluation process. So we had 4 steps in the last section. We took out the middle 2, and now we're talking about the first step and the 4th step in order to get the most out of the event frames we've already created. Once you've identified what critical context you need to capture, you go back to the business case stage. It's really easy to create your business cases after you've done this. Then you go to the evaluation phase. You look at all the event frames that you've generated over the past year, years, whatever it may be, and you try and attach them and link them to business cases. And it's really easy to see which event frames you might not be utilizing to the strongest of their potential. And when you create this evaluation process, it's important to go over every different aspect, right? Templates, asset analytics, look through every analysis that you're utilizing. If you're using EFGen, go through your different configuration nodes. There's a lot of different steps which you can kind of pull into play here. The result ends up being something that might not be so obvious to customers right off the bat. It results in addition and deletion, right? It resolves in change. For your templates and for your analyses. There are some things that you might have to add, tweak to get more context, and there's some event frames that you don't use and you might want to delete to lessen your overall load, right? This can result in bulk event frame recovery and deletion. Again, it all goes back to your business case, and you will need to refine your business case as you go through your event frames, as you realize you might not have been capturing everything, or you might not have created a business case for everything that you're capturing before. So again, it's an iterative process. Whenever I talk to customers about this, again, on-site, over the phone, whatever it may be, there's always a lot of customer hesitancy, and it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. The first one we hear, and I hear this quite a lot, is we may need these event frames in the future. So when I'm talking about critical event context, they say, well, we don't know what we need right now. They have these big, lofty goals, and it's completely true. They might need these in the future. They might not. They really don't know at this time. It's a very common occurrence. So the answer and the solution to this, then, is repeating your evaluation process and update accordingly. It's perfectly fine to do your evaluation process and not know if you need these event frames. It's okay. That happens. But what customers fail to do is repeat this evaluation process again, half a year or a year later. It's really important to come back and take a second look at it And then if you haven't touched these in a year, I think it's pretty clear on whether or not you might need them in the future, right? A lot of customers do it once, but then they don't follow up, and I think that's the key step. Another thing I hear a lot is these event frames are essential to our operation. My question to them is always, what business case is directly impacted? And it's a 50-50 split. Half the customers know it immediately and they say it. The other half goes, I'll have to think about that. I don't know yet. So if you think your event frames are essential, it's time to take a step back and look at your business cases. And again, perform the mapping, see what truly matters and what you're using. I hear a lot, we don't know who may be depending on these event frames, and that's very common. They give users all the power in the world at their fingertips, they come back later and there's millions of event frames there, right? So it's kind of hard to get started, but the goal here is to then go through your evaluation in your business case once again, because you can utilize these. Part of knowing the business case is knowing who utilizes and who looks at these event frames. So if you have appropriately defined business cases, this takes care of itself. It's a daunting step at first, but once you do it, you really quickly realize who is getting value out of what and why. Lastly, and this is, I think everyone has heard this and said this at one point, I do it all the time, right? It's too much time and effort to make the changes required right now. I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I can't do it. And that's okay too, that's okay. What we need to talk about though is how and when changes get made. The next time you go to make a change, the next time you go to upgrade, it's important to go back, look at these 4 steps, look at your business cases, and if you can slide in some changes there, it's time to make the necessary updates. It's time to make the necessary additions to get context. So everyone does have to make change eventually. It's important to put other items into that change of process, right? So right off the bat, whether you're a new customer or an old customer, I always hear this. When I was Event Frame Initiative Lead, this was the #1 question, either in email or talking, how many events can I create? And it's such a tricky answer because it truly is dependent on your scenario, right? But after a while, I started taking a step back and we would answer with, what events will you use? And this kind of seemed to stop customers in their tracks. And it went from, okay, I want to capture anything and everything to, well, actually, yes. What can I create that makes sense for me? This goes hand in hand with the next question is, can I capture everything? Some customers do capture everything and they actually strive, they need it, right? For the average customer, and especially a customer starting out, this is a mistake. You do not want to go and start by capturing everything because then you don't know where to look in your huge data lake of event frames for context. It doesn't just jump out at you. You have to go and wade through them to pick out what's important to you. So with this, I say no. Start with what is needed to meet your current goals and objectives. Once you have that and you have that context, it's much easier to decide whether or not you need to capture everything. With this, there are a few important takeaways. Short and simple, capture meaningful data with event frames, not necessarily all data. Leverage your business cases accordingly. Utilize the strengths of the PI system when you're doing event frame recovery, deletion, what have you. We have a really good backfill. We have really good improvements to the latest release of AF where it makes working with event frames in bulk much easier. So now that we've kind of defined some of the context that we should be reaching for and aiming for with event frames, now it's time to put them into practice with some best practices. When we're going through the step of creating measurable objectives and basically mapping measurable objectives to attributes, sometimes it's not very clear how you should go about that process. Well, hopefully some of these best practices will help. First, we'll talk about best practices with creation of event frames. We'll talk about derived templates, event frames with varying severity, and event frame calculations. And most people might already know this, and that's good. That means you're utilizing event frames in lots of different ways. However, though, this is new to a lot of users. First and foremost, we'll talk about event frame template hierarchies. So we're looking at our library in PI System Explorer, and we have event frame templates. We have a global pump event that everything is derived from. Under this, we have a standard pump downtime and standard pump excursion event frame templates. Under standard pump excursions, we have templates for 4 different types of pumps: centrifugal pump, diaphragm, positive displacement, and turbine. More specifically, under centrifugal pump, we have 2 different pumps at Site A, we have Site A and Site B that both have the same pump type. What we've done here is we've created an event frame template hierarchy. This enables efficient searching that yields comprehensive results incredibly quickly. More importantly, however, this enables standardized event frames and attributes across your business. So again, if we look at our global pump event right under event frame templates, we put the key attributes on this template that all management would need to see and look at. And again, that automatically propagates those attributes down to lower templates, so that way they're always being captured. Management has a quick and easy way to look at what truly matters to them. Again, effective and quick standardization by doing event frame template hierarchies. Another thing it yields is better searching I talked about. So if you search at site A, you're going to get all of the event frames at site A. Previously, if you're a site manager and you want to look at all centrifugal pump events for site A and site B, you'd have to do 2 different queries, aggregate the results, and go from there. Now, if you search for centrifugal pump excursions, you get everything underneath of that. So if you're a site manager, this just lessens your workload and it made things a little bit easier for you. The same is true if you're trying to get excursions for all of your pumps, right? If you want to look at them for centrifugal pumps, diaphragm, etc., you can now search for standard pump excursion event frames and it will bring in every single event frame based off of those templates. An important one that customers ask a lot about is event frames with varying severity. What we're looking at here is an event frame that was created by Asset Analytics, but you'll notice that it actually has children event frames associated with it. When you expand it, you can see that we have 3 children event frames, each one again with varying severity. We have a critical severity, minor, major, our parent is critical. It takes the highest of whatever severity event frame you have and it matches that for the parent. And then underneath that we have a major, minor, and critical sub-child event frames. How do we get here? You can do this with multiple start triggers on an analysis. So with this, you can create multiple child event frames if multiple start triggers are true. So only one start trigger needs to be true in order to trigger the event frames, right? And this only allows for direct children creation. So you can't have a true event frame hierarchy. This is only for one level, one parent-child level. Ideal use cases here are alarms with varying severity. So as time goes on, your severity increases. Perfect use case for that. Simple process monitoring and also grouped alarm scenarios, right? Where you have one alarm that goes off and then you might have that triggers separate alarms. This is a way to possibly group them all together depending on your use case. How I did this one specifically is I just simply created 3 start triggers. So the first start trigger was when a pump speed was greater than a high limit. Then the major severity was when the pump speed was greater than a high limit. And then lastly, obviously, I had a critical severity when the pump speed was greater than a maximum limit. So to go through these just a little bit more in detail, the first event frame that's created is minor severity, and it's a standard event frame created by Asset Analytics. When the second start trigger for a minor event frame becomes true, we can see that we still keep the same name on the initial event frame, but it now becomes a parent. We create a child event frame underneath that with the exact same name as the parent for the first one. And the second event frame, in my case, is pretty much the same name, but it has an updated time string. And this is because I use the timestamp UTC in my naming pattern on my event frame template. More importantly, we can see that our first event, or our severity on our parent event frame has been changed from minor to major now, and that our initial event frame has ended, and we use that end time to start the second event frame. This process is largely repeated when we have our critical event frame, our third trigger, become true. And when we look at the event frame when everything's closed up, we can see that the end time of the last event frame matches the end time of the parent event frame as expected, and we have multiple severities again under our parent event frame now. The last thing I'll talk about for creation, event frame creation, is Asset Analytics and the ability to create analyses that have variables and output expressions. So more previously, when you did event frame generation with Asset Analytics, you could only utilize start and end triggers. With some of our recent releases, we now added the option to do variables and output at close, and this allows you to do calculations within the context of your event frame. So these, they use the start time, the end time, and the duration of your event frame in order to do specific calculations that only should happen and occur when your event frame is running. The cool thing is we can store these calculation results. Not only can we store them, they're captured on an event frame close, and not only can we store them in an event frame attribute, but we can also write them to a pi tag. So let's go back to our pump alarm. Say we calculate a specific maximum during this pump alarm. We can write this information to a pi tag, and then analysis on these pump alarms becomes incredibly easy. We go to that pi tag and we have all of the values of every maximum that was ever captured when this pump was in alarm. Quick and efficient way to get results from analyses. Oh, and on the right-hand side here, I just have a quick example of using event frame substitution parameters within an output at close. You can see that we're just taking a tag average of your pump speed. We're utilizing the event frame start time and the event frame end time to help put that tag average in the context of the event frame. Ideal use cases for this are any calculation that requires event frame context, right? So this is when you need to capture information that's unique and critical to particular events. So it might not make sense to put this analysis on the element because then you'd be always running this analysis, right? You'd always be running this calculation. It makes a little bit more sense to put on the event frame as then it only runs within the context of that event frame. And this is ideal also for conditional calculations and shift calculations. Now we'll go into some best practices with visualization. If you're a PyVision guru, then I apologize, you already know these. From what we've been seeing when I go on site and I look at customer setups, they're not utilizing PyVision specifically to the best of their capabilities, especially when it comes to event frames. So I just came up with 4 quick examples of how you can get the most of visualizing your event frames with PyVision today. We're going to talk about reason codes, pinned events, event frame comparison, and event frame details. We get this question all the time, and we used to get a lot more before we came out with reason codes. It was, how can we write back to event frames? How can our operators update event frames with pertinent information after the fact? And the answer is reason codes. You can utilize reason codes in PySystem Explorer, and then within the event details page and the event table within PyVision. What we see here, highlighted in the red box, is a multi-tiered, so a hierarchical enumeration set. You can select any reason from this enumeration set, and this will be forever stored on the event frame as the reason that caused that event frame. This is a quick example of showing how it works in PyVision in the events table specifically. If you click on the pencil button, you get a nice pop-out that has the enumeration set. You can select from here, and once you do, it gets saved to the event frame and displayed in the event frame table. Next, we'll transition into pinned events. And it's a little bit small from here, but on the top left-hand side, we can see that we have 2 pinned events. If we focus on the display canvas and zoom in, we can see that our 2 pinned events right here, if we click on them, we can highlight them in yellow. This first pinned event is simply basically a standard deviation. It's two standard deviations above the average for the clean in place, CIP, supply temperature. I did the exact same thing for the low, right? The low. This is 2 standard deviations below the average. Theoretically, with my 2 pinned events, every event frame should fall in between these, otherwise it's out of specification. And we can see that very easily. You could tell this was out of spec beforehand, right? It's wildly out of spec. But you can see here that an operator must have let a set point on for too long. And you can see how much it varies and how much it sticks out between our high and our low pinned event frames. This goes hand in hand with event frame comparison, which we'll talk about next. Event frame comparison is the best way to view and analyze data within a time range. It provides excellent context within your visualization, and it allows you to utilize the power of templates in order to compare like events, analyze root causes, and really dive into your event frames to see why something might be happening or might be occurring. Again, we have the giant picture here that might be a little small for those in the back. I apologize. On the left-hand side, we have both the event frame list, the events pane, and the attributes pane. In the middle, we have the event frame comparison, the display canvas, and we have a Gantt chart. If we pop out the if we pop out the display canvas, you can quickly see every event frame that you're currently comparing in your events pane. If you look at your Gantt chart, you have the option to align and zoom on specific children event frames. And what this does is this narrows the display canvas to only look at specific child event frames. And again, my pinned events come into play here. This is what you can utilize to quickly verify whether or not a certain child event frame has a lot of parameters in spec or out of spec. So here we can see that for the most part, all of our SIP supply temperatures for this specific child event frame are in specification, right? We also have, again, these are a close-up, blow-up of our events pane and our attributes pane. The events pane just lists any events that you can compare and contrast, and the attributes pane lists any attributes on the event frame or any attributes on the parent or the primary reference element, So if you pick an attribute from the attributes pane and drag it onto the display canvas, it now updates with multiple attributes. So if you want to compare multiple attributes at one to see how they change over a time range, you can do it purely within PyVision using the functionality here. The last best practice we'll talk about is utilizing the event details page. This is a one-stop shop for looking at particular event frames. You can see in the middle we have a big display canvas that highlights any and all attributes in the table below. You can pick and choose which attributes you actually display. You can see in the top right-hand corner, we have an acknowledge button. If you have this set up on your event frame template, you can use this page to acknowledge specific event frames. When this button is clicked, you can see that we get a nice little message in our configuration pane that basically says who acknowledged the event and when. If you're using notifications, this also details who, or not who actually, but how many users the notification was sent to. Lastly, this is a perfect place to update, put comments, and you can attach files here as well. These are stored as event frame annotations. So here we just have a simple comment that says investigating vibrations on the pump. Lastly, I mentioned before that you can also update reason codes from this page, and this is showcased here. So now we'll talk about a few best practices surrounding utilization. These aren't really necessarily helpful for the average user. This is more maybe at an admin level, but there's enough, or there's three main ones that I wanted to point out because they can have a major impact on how you utilize and work with event frames. We'll talk about indexing important attributes, bulk event frame deletion, and event frame searches. When you index important attributes, what it essentially allows for is quick search results and fast value retrieval. You're supposed to index attributes on event frames that users search for and utilize the most. I'm a batch guy, so one of the big ones is batch ID, right? We index that on event frames, so that way when you search for your batches, you can just search off the batch ID attribute. Again, this improves performance with stored attribute values. There is a small subtle difference between indexing attributes on elements and indexing attributes on event frames. Indexing attributes on elements doesn't really provide the same benefit as event frame attributes because not all element attributes are actually stored on the SQL server. All event frame attributes, though, are. So that's why indexing important attributes for event frames can really yield for some faster searches and better search results. We have a utility called AFDiag. It's been bundled with the AF server since the creation of time, right? And it's a command line utility, and it's always had the ability to delete event frames in bulk. However, previously, there was only one option for this, and it was a start time. You can only put in a time, and it would delete all of your event frames up to that time. So it didn't really capture too many use cases. There wasn't too many customers that really got enough value out of this. However, recently we added some updates and we now allow switches. So you can select a database, a template, a start, and an end time. If you specify all of these, it makes deleting specific event frames incredibly easy. I've been recommending this to customers who do a lot of testing with event frames, and they only need them temporarily, and then they need to get rid of them. This is a perfect tool and utility for them. Lastly, we have 3 quick ways to improve searching, event frame searches. We already talked about 2 of these, the utilize index attributes. We covered at the beginning of this. Again, that can speed up searches. The latest release actually has incremental improvements for simple queries, right? When you search for overlapped queries and event frame searches that basically have a start time and then start time, end time, and then an attribute. These searches should be much quicker. So if you're looking for specific things and you know you have an attribute that you want to search for, or you have a particular name you want to search for, these queries should be much quicker now. The last thing, which I've talked about previously in the beginning, was event frame template hierarchies. If you define your event frame template hierarchy appropriately, you can quickly and efficiently search for specific event frames depending on what you're looking for. With this, we'll go to a quick summary. The number one thing that we want to talk about, especially if you're a new customer and you're starting to utilize event frames and work with event frames, is remember these 4 steps here. Define a business case, create measurable objectives, event frame implementation, and event frame evaluation. These will aid you on your guide to getting context from your event frames and really applying them to your everyday operations. Key takeaways throughout the presentation are: start with the why. Even if you already have event frames, it's still incredibly helpful to start here. Start with the why, and this helps build your business case. And again, this ensures that you're building every event frame to a specific goal to solve a specific problem. If you really want to have context with your event frames, that is the key. Again, capture meaningful data and not necessarily all data. There's a fine line, and once you figure out what that is, it makes it incredibly powerful. We talked about a few best practices with creation, utilization, and visualization of event frames, and there is no one right way, right? A combination of the best practices will most effectively allow you to get the most from your event frames. Closing notes is context can change over time. Critical events can change over time. If I leave you with nothing else, I want to leave you with evaluation process for your event frames is necessary. This is ignored by a lot of customers, and this really helps set and provide the context you need to get the most out of your event frames. I think with that, I'll showcase my speaker information one more time. And one of the things we're trying to leverage a lot, or we have been leveraging a lot for about a year, 2 years now, is user voice. So if you have an idea or something that you want to promote, or you want a certain enhancement or request, if you put on user voice, all of our product managers look at this daily to decide what we're going to work on and incorporate into our products next. It really is a good tool, and now that we are leveraging it across all of our products, we're really seeing it really is starting to make a difference. With that, we have about 3 minutes for questions. So anyone have any questions? I think we have a microphone runner somewhere. Do we? If not, you can, you just yell it out.
I got 2 questions. Number one is recent codes.
Yeah.
Are they customizable? Or are they static, as DB type things?
They're customizable in the sense that you can pick which enumeration set you have, so you can define whatever goes in that enumeration set. They're not customizable in the fact that it always will be a reason attribute on your event frame. You can't customize that portion of it at all.
Number 2, is there any way through PyVision to make a display that allows you to add annotations to event frames?
The only way is through the comment pane on the event details page. Yep, so all that does is it reads and writes from annotations.
Understood. Just thinking like for board operators, if they want to create an event that come up, them having the ability to add those comments in there would be helpful.
Yeah. Oh, were you asking not in PyVision?
No, within PyVision.
Oh, yeah, within PyVision, it's only the event details page. That's the only way to do that currently.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Outside of PyVision, it's PySystem Explorer, and I think you can use AFSDK as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. Oh, I think, actually, I'm not 100% sure about that. I know we were thinking about adding that. I don't know if we actually did or not, but I can find that out. Any other questions? Yes?
If you have the minor, major, critical,
Mm-hmm.
and you use notifications, is that all going to be tied to the same subscriptions? Or
Yes, yes.
The minor goes to these people, the major to an escalated group, and critical to an even further escalated group?
the way I displayed it, they're all going to be sent to the same group. Again, this is you create your notification rules based on a single analysis, right? And so because there's just multiple start triggers within this analysis, they're still going to follow the same notification rule. Cool. Going once, going twice. Well, hey, I can't thank you guys enough for coming and listening. Any other questions, feel free to reach out to me via email. We'll go from there. Thank you.